Will come to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Chairman Richardson,
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Here.
Secretary Grant, Member Garad,
Here.
Member Faison, Member Perez,
Here.
Alternate Member Childs,
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers, School Board Member Gilbert.
Here.
Okay, there is a quorum. We have a new member to swear in. Chelsea?
Thank you. I'd like to invite our new board member, Megan Moscaso, up to the podium to be sworn in. Hi. I would like you to please place your hand on the Bible and repeat after me. I'll start over. State your name.
Okay, I, Megan Moscoso,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
protect, and defend
protect, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and government
and government
of the United States
of the United States
and state of Florida
and state of Florida
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
domestic or foreign,
domestic or foreign,
and that I will bear
and that I will bear
true faith,
true faith,
loyalty, and allegiance
loyalty, and allegiance
to the same,
same,
and that I am entitled
and that I'm entitled
to hold office
to hold office
under the Constitution,
under the Constitution,
that I will faithfully perform
that I will faithfully perform
all of the duties
all of the duties
of the office
of
of the Planning and Zoning Commission
the Planning and Zoning Commission
of the City of Titusville,
of the City of Titusville,
on which I am about to enter.
of which I'm about to enter,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. You may take a seat up on the dais.
It's a longer oath of office than being sworn in as president. I'll let Megan take her seat and tell us something briefly about you when you get to the microphone. Yeah.
All right, so I'm learning even how to push the buttons tonight. Yes, my name is Megan Moscoso. I am a semi-new resident to Titusville. I've been here in August. It will be 2 years. So I moved over from Orlando, but before that I've lived in Guatemala and in Malaysia. And so I'm excited to serve the community here. I have 2 young kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old that attend school here. And I started coming to a lot of these meetings and just kind of got interested in what was happening in the city. And so I'm excited to get to be part of what's happening and to see Titusville grow and get to meet new people through it. So thank you so much.
Outstanding. Welcome to the commission.
Thank you.
Next item is approval of the minutes of June 21st.
Motion to approve the minutes. Second.
Is there any questions or comments to make to the minutes? Okay, roll call, please.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. There are no consent agenda items, and the first item under old business is the accessory dwelling units and the building height. Will someone move that they be at the end of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we take the accessory dwelling unit discussion under old business and as well as item B and move it to the end of the agenda so the public can present their cases to us
Second.
earlier.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay, under new business, the first thing we have to discuss is item A, small scale comprehensive plan amendment, SSA number 6.
Good evening. My name is Christy Anderson. I'm the senior planner here. Thank you. The item is, once again, 9A, and it's page 86 of 326 in your packet. It's a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, 6/2023. The applicant, Yair Kanofo, on behalf of the property owner, Rissam Investments LLC, is requesting a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment with rezoning on approximately 7 acres for the purposes of constructing a multifamily residential development on property located south of Tropic Street and west of South Dixie Avenue. The intent of the request is to change the future land use designation on the property from low-density residential to high-density residential category and rezone the property from single-family medium-density zoning to the multifamily high-density residential R3 zoning. A couple of things to note. The comprehensive plan future land use small scale amendment is not consistent with the city's comprehensive plan pursuant to FLU policy 1.14.6. High density residential uses shall be located adjacent to at least a collector or arterial unless the property is located along Rock Pit Road. The subject property is within proximity to Rock Pit Road, which lies to the west approximately 300 feet. However, it is located adjacent to Tropic Street, which is classified as a non-local road per the comprehensive plan's future functional classification map that has been provided in your packet as an exhibit. The rezoning is inconsistent with section 28-307A of the Land Development Regulations, which states that the purpose of the multifamily high-density residential R3 district is intended to satisfy the needs for a high concentration of population, is located adjacent to arterial or collector streets, and is well served by public services and facilities. The area is currently developed with a mix of single-family residential, multifamily residential, and commercial uses. The proposed density increase of 35 units to 105 units would be incompatible with the surrounding low-density residential pattern on Tropic Street, and if approved, this site would be the only R3 zoning located along Tropic Street, with the exception of a vacant parcel located on the corner of Tropic Street and South Singleton Avenue, which is a collector road. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you have at this time.
Eddie let you go solo.
He's here to help.
Any questions of the staff? Any questions? Member Garrod.
I'm sorry, but I do have a question. Thank you. You commented that one of the contingencies for this land use change is to have,
Pull your mic down, please.
is to have access from a collector road, I believe it was, and Tropic Street, the road it takes access from is a local street.
Correct. The Tropic that is adjacent to the property is Tropic Avenue, not Rock Pit Road.
And the property doesn't have adjacency or accessibility to a collector road.
No, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Before I open the public hearing, I have received a request. Dear Chairman Richardson, I'm requesting your permission to allow my sister-in-law, Laura Ward, to speak on my behalf at the July 18th, I think it's the 19th, isn't it? It should be 19th. P&Z meeting as I'm unable to attend due to a medical procedure. I live on Tropic Street and this application greatly concerns me. Signed Patricia Matthews. And Laura Ward doesn't need any permission to talk. The first person we'll hear from is the developer.
Mr. Chairman, before we get started, would you like me to read the notice in case anyone would like to participate? I'd like to just read to the audience the notice for this meeting. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in resolution number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. You may proceed. Go up all the way to the podium and speak up at the microphone right here in the middle of the room. Thank you. First, state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Yair Knaflo. The address is 17011 North Bay Road. The address of the property that we are speaking about is 1625 Tropic Street. And basically, what I have to say is that the property meets all the physical guidelines. The only subject that is in question is the fact that Tropic Street is named as a local road. The question here is what type of traffic speed or road differences or sizes between Rockpit Road and Tropic Street, which is only 200 to 300 feet in distance, which the speed limit and the traffic are pretty much the same. Additionally, the traffic study that was done by a professional traffic engineer proved that the access to the property and the traffic on Tropic Street allows by far the request to change the zoning. Additionally, Tropic is located only to 200 to 300 feet from the junction of Rockpit Road, and according to section 114.6 is also in a direct contact with that road. There is another R3 zoning property of Singleton Road and Tropic Street. So as far as the outside views, Tropic Street is having an existence of R3 property already. Also, the property that is in border with us, with our property, or 1625 Tropic, already zoned and established as a R3 multifamily residential. Mainly and very important is the need of the public for additional units in the area. I understand that the state of Florida started to allow commercial areas to become residential areas. A property such as the above definitely meets the requirements and as a residential neighborhood that can easily merge into high density residential community and make the entire street way nicer and safer. The property won't affect the value of the surrounding properties and actually will increase those properties in value, having a development instead of an abandoned property along the residential area. The developer will provide plans that will be 100% with the city, county, and state statute codes and guidelines. Also with a lot of care to the neighbors, lights, views, and traffic access to the new neighborhood. We will use the many large trees that surround the property to keep the nature layouts, include the outside and inside views of the property. We will provide historic research in regards to stormwater and everything that should come along with that. Lastly, looking on Tropic Street, all the way to Singleton Street, it's where Tropic Street is ending. There is only 3 properties left to build on it. And so with the very low traffic that this street is having now, there is no way for additional future growth that can harm the traffic. We are looking at less than 1 car per minute in the peak morning hours going in and out the site, and 55 vehicles, in 66 cars coming in and out per minute in the evening peak hours. So mainly that's what is going on, and I, hoping that we will move it forward.
Are there any questions of the applicant?
I have one.
Okay. Member Childs.
So, yeah, right here. So besides the fact that the street doesn't, well, at least they're saying the collector road, that's one of the requirements. The other one is that there's nothing around, that everything's single family around it. So wouldn't it be weird to have, I guess, a multifamily development right in the middle of all these single-family housing? I mean, what do you think?
I was driving that street back and forth many times, and when you're looking at that street, it's a very much mixed of properties around there. Commercials, Singleton is probably about half a mile, I will say, from there. Rock Pit, which already having a bunch of 5 or 6 different properties that zoned R3 right around the corner. And the property that is in border with us or is an R3 development. That is an existing development.
But is it the vacant one? Is it the one that's vacant, or there's a
already
development
built.
there?
I
I haven't driven around there for a little while, so I don't even know. But okay, well, thank you.
Member Moscoso, probably butchered it.
That's fine. Thank you. So I noticed on April 25th that there was a community engagement meeting. So I would like to know how many people attended that and how the community is feeling.
It was only one person that attended the meeting. I emailed him back. His concern was the lights that gonna affect his property because he just told me that he was just across the street, and his concern was the lights that will, that the property will mainly the lights that may be gonna approach his property, and I assured him that we will make sure that it's not going to be an issue for the neighbors. And I emailed him back, and I never heard back from him after that.
And how many people received notification?
I believe it's on the application that we replied to the city. I believe it was 90-something or close to 100 different people.
Okay, thank you.
I read that build out, you could have as many as 105 units. Is that your intention, to have that many units built?
Well, I can't 100% say what will be the final number. We will try to make as much as we can legally have according to the plans that we will, and what is going to be approved here. And according to the investors that, and the need and everything that's going to be around that.
Member Moscoso again.
Thank you. I probably shouldn't talk on my first day this much.
No, it's fine.
So my question is, what exactly is this? I saw that you were open for affordable housing, but I didn't quite see a site plan. It doesn't seem like we even know how many numbers of units are going to be built there. So could you give us some more information on what if we're going to be rezoning something, I think we need to know what it's being rezoned for. So could you give us a little bit more information about what are the concrete plans for this?
The plan is to check all the directions, and it's also low-income property, low-income housing, and even a regular different type of townhomes. It's pretty much depends on the investors and what we can build there, and what will be the agreement with the government if we're going to do a low-income housing development, or if we decide to just do a regular different a type of housing there. So we like to keep the option to determine that once we have that zoning approved.
So just to reiterate what you said, you don't know exactly what's going to be built there right now.
Right now, we are not sure because we're trying to put the funds together for that, and that's the first thing. And the second thing is we need to see what can be done from the state, what type of help we will get from the state or county or city if we do the low-income housing.
Member Garrett.
In the staff report, they mentioned that you didn't provide a site plan, and from your discussion, you just mentioned that you're looking for investors. Do you have any other developments you can use as examples of where you've created development from these land use and zoning districts similar to this?
Well, the investors or whoever is involved done so in other countries. there is nothing that I can, show you at that point. It's going to be a developer that we're going to, put in place and make sure that we're going to get everything approved through the city, and we're going to go all over the guidelines and whatever we need to make sure that it's going to be together with what legally we're supposed to provide.
And the second question is that in the staff report, which you're aware of, they spoke about the failure to comply with one of the components of the future land use element, which is transportation accessibility, and that a project with the higher density development has to be on a road which is designated as a collector road. You understand what the collector road is as opposed to a local street. And in the case of your property not having access to a collector road, you're aware that that's kind of a strategic failure in developing property, at least at this case, because it isn't consistent with the comprehensive plan's element. Have you any answer to that? I understood your traffic analysis. I read that. I understand what you perceive as traffic, but all things are subject to change, and with growing populations, traffic grows proportionately. So one would reasonably expect traffic to continue growing, and therein is why the higher density developments are required to be on a collector road as opposed to a local street. Do you understand that's a kind of a big issue?
I understand that. The first thing is that we got notified from the city about this just on Friday afternoon, about the fact that they are, having problem with the fact that it's a local road and not a collector. We applied a while ago, and just on Friday I heard it. So I put the information together as much as I can to, to answer this. When you're looking on Tropic Street, there is only 3 vacant lots that along that street. So even though they're gonna build and develop those 3 extra properties, the street is very much low with traffic, and you only have like 3 extra properties, so that street could never be as busy with what is out there right now. So it shouldn't be in any traffic study that will take place in the future. Considering adding 3 more properties into that street, it won't meet the high level of traffic that will affect that street.
I also have a question for staff, if I may. With the way that the element talks about collector roads and then kind of has the sidebar comment with Rock Pit Road being referenced as a unique road, is there a history as to why Rock Pit was specified in the element?
There is. So when we did some research to figure out where the designation of Rock Pit Road as the only local road, and it appears in the city council agenda for April 24th of 2007. There was a request for advisability from city council, from staff, and I'll just read a portion of the staff report. It says, the planning division has received a request for rezoning of various vacant properties that currently have a single-family designation along the north side of Rock Pit Road. These rezonings are not currently allowed due to the policies in the future land use element for multifamily that prohibits higher density development along local roads. This criteria serves to protect single-family development, which is usually placed along local roads, and to encourage the placement of multifamily development along collector and arterial roads. This policy is logical in that higher density development should be located closer to the roadways that can handle the trips that are generated in a compact area such as an apartment complex along arterials or collectors. However, this policy also has had the effect of preventing infill development and redevelopment along Rock Pit Road in the area between South Street and Tropic Street. Even though this area has 28% of its uses as multifamily and slightly less as single family, 25%, it shows the attached map. There's a variety of property sizes and shapes along Rock Pit Road, some with direct access to the road and others with very little access. The attached zoning map also shows that there is a discrepancy in that some of the properties along the west side of Rock Pit Road between Collins Avenue and South Street are currently developed as single family, even though they have an R3 designation. So in short, it appears that there was an existing development pattern of some multifamily uses, duplexes and higher, and the comp plan was preventing infill of development that would complement the existing development pattern. And so this change was made to allow for similar type development to occur along a local road, Rock Pit Road.
I understand. Thank you very much. And I guess I would ask the applicant, so the history of how Rock Pit Road, with the exception and the development that has the same land use you're seeking, a high density, would seem to beg the question, should Tropic Street be re-examined at a point in the future, and consideration as part of a comprehensive plan brings Tropic Street to a level of designation as a collector road as opposed to a local, you would then have the glove to fit the hand in two, as opposed to the hand to fit the glove. In my opinion, that would be the correct procedure. You certainly don't have a hard, solid plan that you're investigating to develop overnight. So if you were to rethink the pattern to, as the history shows, have the city or you study changing the road designation classification from local to collector, then you would meet the criteria of the comprehensive plan's requirement for your request. Whether that was approved would be a subject in the future, but at least you would have that checkbox filled.
When you look on Rock Pit Road and you look on the properties, the R3 properties there, they have a one single exit, entrance and exit in those properties. That's very narrow. When you're looking on 1625 Tropic, on that property that we are talking about right now, there is a very large access area and road that basically can give us the options of a few different entrance and exits into the property, which, or even make an extra lane along the street, along traffic, like a runaway type of lane that's going to basically make that 100% safer and easier to go in and out the property, because of the fact that the property have, I believe, about 1,200 to 1,500 feet of distance that can, or more, that can basically, you can get a few different entrances and exits along the Tropic Street.
I suppose if I can continue with my question, I guess I should ask a staff question if I may. First, is Garden Street considered a collector road in the comprehensive plan?
I believe it's designated as an arterial. We
Arterial?
have the roadway classification map on page 127 of your agenda.
Do you understand the terminology arterial road, collector road, and local street?
Yes, I was reading about it.
So in the case of the multiple family development that's on Garden Street, like that's a right-of-way and a road section that's able to handle volumes of traffic. In the case of Tropic Street being a local street, to me, that tells me the city doesn't have any long-range plan as part of its comprehensive plan to make that road sufficient in right-of-way and in capacity by road design to handle increased volumes of traffic, which is kind of why they are requesting the application not be approved, because you do not have access to a road, and that road being local isn't planned for any type of improvement. So it's back to my comment that it seems fair to suggest maybe this has to be looked at as changing the designation of the road so that the city has an opportunity to examine how would they handle increased traffics like with your development and others, or redevelopment, which can occur, changing those traffic patterns within a road that's intended to handle that traffic. Local streets aren't intended to handle high volumes of traffic.
So what is the difference between Rock Pit and Tropic? Well, Rock Pit have already 5 or 6 different R3 zoning along that street, which is smaller even than Tropic Street.
In some cases, it might be that the road being designated has been at least considered, and that would also in future consider that the road would have to be improved as traffic volumes warrant. That there's some type of reasoning that they've moved the status to collector. So in your case,
It's not.
same
It's still,
kind of-
it's still a local road. Rock Pit is considered a local road.
I think that was the exception when I asked the question at the beginning with the future land use element, list that as a collector road.
I think, from my understanding, it's still a local road, because local road is considered up to or around 50 feet, and a collector road is 90 feet. That's what it says on the agenda that with the table of measurements.
But Rock Pit dumps into a major arterial, being 405 or South Street. That's the difference.
I'm not sure exactly that it's pretty much when you are there, it's all look the same, and it's the traffic but what I was saying is that as far as like the entrance and everything that needs to be going around it, we have the option of make everything wider as far as the street, and basically so cars can merge in and out safely and not cause anything that will consider major high traffic or issues, in the future. And like I say, there is only 3 vacant lots on that street, so I don't know how bad the traffic can get in the next, let's say, 20 years or 50 years, because there is nothing else to build other than those 3 vacant properties, and the traffic there is very, very low. I mean, we did the study, and the traffic engineer was laughing when he was talking to me. It's nothing even close to be a busy or an issue. So that was, and like I said, that situation with the roads that are not, okaying the zoning. We just got that information on Friday afternoon. So I had not too much time to research it even more and give you guys more details.
Any other, Mr. Eitan?
Do you own the property?
Oh, if I own properties?
This property.
That's a family owned.
So
It's another company, but it's a family owned.
So and you're looking to develop it. Why not just develop it as R1B as a single family home residential neighborhood, which is consistent with the neighborhood and also consistent with the zoning?
Well, we made some researches, and basically we there's a need for developing a high high amount of units, and also when you're looking on investors, it's kind of difficult to get investors into something to develop the entire area with the trees and all the expenses that comes with that, and in the end to get a very much low amount of units. So it's gonna be at that point, based on what I know, impossible to get the funds together for.
So is there no other R3 zone pieces of property available in Titusville to do the development?
Oh, we don't own any other properties in Titusville. That's the only one that we have ownership for. So.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori, cards, please.
And I have 6 cards. Dan Holland. Dan Holland.
Good evening. I moved into Titusville back in 2012, and one of the things that I was happy to see was that there was a comp plan in place to keep our location as a low-density residential, and it's worked out marvelously. Personally, I live right smack in the middle of the property that we're talking about. And when it's beautiful, it has the trees, but yet I realized that sometime in the future that there would be some sort of development going in there. And I thought, well, if and when it does come to take place, the density would max out at roughly 35 homes. While that would be more than personally that I would like, it was something that I could live with. And so I ended up buying the property. The fact that I was the only person that showed up to that initial meeting, and I was kind of disappointed that there was no site plan. It was all, just words and describing what could be done or what have you. And yet, the way that is presented, without any hard facts or firm commitment, asking for a rezoning. And, so the zoning could be given, and then what may actually be placed there might not be what we all would really wish to have happen. So I'm in full agreement with the staff recommendation that it not be allowed to proceed with a change of the zoning that we have. I kind of disagree with the way the traffic would be. I live there, and there's such a long stretch of Tropic Street between Park and up to Singleton that there are times that people are just flying along that road because it is not that heavily traveled, as he has said, but at the same time, you add 100 units in there, and people are going out to I-95. Your options are either take Rock Pit and to get on the 405 or run up to Singleton and, take your exit either way. And so, just the way people are, I know that they're going to be flying particularly up Tropic because you have a nice long straightaway and there's nothing there. So I feel that the zoning that is in place was the correct decision to restrict any further encroachment with multifamily development. So, I'm in full agreement with the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you state your address for the record?
1620 Tropic.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next card.
Leslie Roberts.
Hi, my name's Leslie Roberts, and I live at 1510 Tropic Street. I've lived there since 1968, and there's not too much traffic on Tropic Street at this time. I'm, like Dan said, we're one of the 4 or 5 houses that is directly across from the woods, and I wouldn't have a problem if it was residential, but we surely don't need any multifamily apartments in there. It would be a lot more traffic, and sometimes it's like a raceway now as it is, and it would just be a lot more traffic in there than what we would like to see. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Quitman Swells.
Hi, my name is Quitman Swells. I live at 1512 Tropic Street. And my main complaint is the people driving down Tropic Street at the speeds of Daytona 500, And a few years ago, a little girl got hit by a car down the street from where I live. And it's been a few years back, but it can exist, and we don't need the traffic. It's dangerous. That road's not wide. It's dangerous. That's all I got to say. We don't need no more traffic, for sure. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next card.
Tony Schifolo.
You're going to tell us about the historical Norwood House.
Well, it is on Tropic Street at 715 Tropic Street. And Tropic Street is a very nice single-family residential street. The R3 property that he's talking about, that abuts the property he's talking about, is on Rock Pit Road. And I'd like to point out about all the crime statistics, which I did not take the time to do, about Rock Pit Road. There are murders, there are burglaries, there are robbers who burgle other places and are caught there, apprehended. We do not need 105 apartments. All the studies that were done, the traffic and the school studies, were done for 99 units. It's currently zoned. It could host 35 units on that 7 acres, maintain a lot of trees, and they found on one dry day in January that there were no wetlands, even though they were reported. I suppose they should have come to my house on Tropic Street where my grass was brown, but if you came the other day, I had standing water, and I'm at 715 Tropic Street, not over there. I'd like to also point out there's the feeder road, Tropic Street, is a little street. At Park, there's a stop sign, and over a mile away at Singleton, there's a stop sign. We don't even have a red light. There's so little traffic, and he's talking about, oh, we don't know, 99, the study was done on 99 cars, and that would be, I have it in here somewhere. I don't need to go into it. You guys know. 41 exits. He said 66 cars per minute at rush hour at a stop sign onto Park Avenue, or way over there at Singleton, which is also a fairly busy road. They found no wetlands. They found no endangered or any wildlife. I kind of find that hard to believe. We have raccoons. We have possums. We have gopher turtles. I live 4 blocks away from the railroad tracks. It's just kind of a travesty, and I'd like to point out that number 5 on the staff report said there was no impact to public health and safety. I think the crowded conditions of 105 units there versus what could be 35 or even 5 or 10 single-family homes to keep in context of the neighborhood, there'd be less trees for fresh air. And you know how crowded conditions, the mice in the boxes, they get crowded, they do harmful things to one another. I'm not saying that their tenants would be mice. However, I am saying crowded conditions lead to problems. And Tropic Street now is just a wonderful street. I drive out to Singleton Road. I maybe go too fast sometimes, but it's just so lovely. I get into looking at all the beautiful places along Tropic Street. Please don't let them ruin it.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Colleen Grady.
Hi, I am Colleen Grady. I live at 1506 Tropic Street, which is directly across from the forested area that he's talking about. And we just moved there at the beginning of this year. We just bought the home. And one of the reasons why we really like the home was because there's not a lot of like apartments and people right in front of us. And even if there were 35 more homes in front of us, that would be okay. But adding 105 units, because he was talking about the max, he was not talking about like the minimum, right? So that would be a lot more. So he also had said that the more cars wouldn't really be too much traffic, but the area is quite low traffic. There's not that much. And less traffic means more safety. He was saying, oh, it would be quite safe, but I don't think it would be as safe. If there's 105 versus 35, that's over twice as much. And then, let me see. I was not aware of the meeting in April. He had said everybody received it. Me and my husband did not. So, and if there was, I would have gone to that meeting as well. More people equals more crime is my belief, especially when you have a lot of people piling into houses. 105 units doesn't mean 105 people. That could mean 105 single families, and sometimes people don't just do single families inside the units, they do multiple families inside the units. So it's going to be, I think, more than, what people would really expect to be coming into the area. And then, he had said that there was a need for more apartments and more low-income housing, but I was reading on like the Titusville like Facebook page or whatever, and there are many properties that are already approved for like apartments throughout the Titusville area. So if there's other places that are already being built, like I know the one on the corner of Singleton and Tropic, that one is just going underway or something like that I had read. So there's already more places being built, so I don't see a reason for the property directly in front of us to have more. And it's in the middle of a street. It's not like it's on a corner. It's not like there's more thoroughfares. And even if you were to build a second lane for traffic to go in and out, I don't feel as if that would be safe because my gate goes right up to the edge of my driveway. So I have to, when I pull out of my gate, I have to be right slightly in front of the road. And people are respectful and go around my car as I open up my gate. But if there's a lot of people coming and people don't pay attention when they're driving. I've seen a lot of people on their phones lately, and I don't want to be in an accident because somebody from the apartments in front of me has decided that they want it to be wild, or there's teenagers who are driving their cars all around the apartments. That's just not something that, brought us to the area. So, thank you.
Next card, please.
Keith Grady.
Hi, good evening. My apologies. I just decided to come up here about 5 minutes ago, so I'm a little ill-prepared. But as my wife Colleen just said, we moved here a few months ago, but we bought our house in December. And the reason why we moved here was because me, being a military retiree, I am on my way out of being of the military, decided to retire in a place that valued families, valued old traditions, and was a really great place to start and raise a family. And we looked around, and I've previously been to Titusville, and I've fallen in love with this place a long time ago, and I decided to move here. And specifically on Tropic Street, 1506 Tropic Street, which is right across the street from that, this planned area. And not knowing that this would be an issue or even come up. Looking at the street, it's a very narrow street, all single-family homes along the stretch where we are. And the area itself would be changed, right? The integrity of our neighborhood would be changed, and that area would be changed if you added multiple units, especially 105, as which he's talking about. So I just wanted to implore you, as leaders in our community, to preserve that integrity of this, because this is the reason why you have families coming here that want to contribute to the city and stay here forever. As with some of our neighbors here who have been here for a long time, we intend to be here for a long time. We are investors, but we invest in our family, we invest in our city and our town. We're not here to make money. We're here to raise our families and live and be productive citizens of our town. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you for your time.
Welcome to Titusville. Thank you for serving in the military. Next card.
Laura Ward.
Good evening. I'm Laura Ward, and my sister-in-law, who lives on Tropic, was not able to come tonight, so she asked me to speak for her and to bring her concerns to you about this application. She's concerned about the traffic on the development, since it will add significantly, and Tropic's over a mile long, not a single stop sign like Tony said, or no traffic light, nothing. So the traffic is a concern for someone who lives there. She says they're already whizzing past her front porch, and this development will add significantly to the additional trips. A traffic study doesn't really address an impact to residents, and that's, of course, what she's bringing to you. She's also concerned that if this applicant is allowed to just ignore this significant and important policy in our comp plan, the one that prohibits R3 development on a local road, and it also, you have it in the LDRs as well. I guess it's in your, you know what the policies say, right? I don't have to read them, okay. If you allow the applicant to just disregard these guidelines, then there are several other large, very large parcels of land on that street. And she's worried, of course, that this sets a precedent. If you do it here, you can do it anywhere in town. So the applicant comes to the P&Z Commission with a staff recommendation for denial. Now, that's something you don't see very often. I've been coming a long time, and I don't see it often. So I followed the application from the beginning, and I know that the applicant had to have been made aware by the staff that what he wants to do is outside the guidelines for the development in our city. And I'm sure they tried to get him to change his mind about what he's asking for. There are plenty of profitable ways the property can be developed. So what he is proposing is just flat out wrong. And we don't dump high-density residential uses on our local streets for all the obvious reasons. He's pointing to Rock Pit Road as, may I finish?
How much more time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Uh-huh.
Is there a motion to give Ms. Ward two additional minutes?
I'll make a motion to give her additional.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor? Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So thank you. He's pointing to Rock Pit Road as some kind of example to be followed. But everything on Rock Pit Road, with the single exception of the WinVet project, was built before Titusville even had a comp plan. So that this development was grandfathered under the comp plan. The WinVet development was special housing, and an exception was made for that because it was housing for homeless veterans. It's not unusual for cities to make exceptions for that sort of housing. Okay, I can give you a little map here that shows when the things on Rock Pit were built.
Thank you.
So the congestion and overdevelopment of Rock Pit Road is exactly why the current comp plan prohibits this type of intensity on a local street. It's basically a mess over there. It's way too much development on that road. So this community spends a lot of time and effort creating its own local comp plan. And some of you may even have sat through some of the workshops that the planning staff runs when they're developing the comp plan. Our comp plan's a statement of how this community, the public and their elected officials, want their city to grow. And the applicant is saying to us, I don't care what you've decided. To me, that's just wrong. Thank you.
Next card, please.
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnston, I'm coming to you as a registered professional engineer, 860 Poinsettia Avenue. And I noticed in the analysis, I don't believe I see anything about the right-of-way width of the local road. The standard right-of-way width for a local road is 50 feet. Now, if you've driven by that area, you'll see that the fencing and shrubbery goes right on almost up to the curb. There's no way of putting a sidewalk over there that would extend to Rock Pit or to Park Avenue. So it appears to me as I think there should be a notice that as a local road, it has deficiency as far as the right-of-way width. I'm asking that to be added to your review part. But what I'm going to remark is that there's serious problems in our city's comprehensive plan, including violation of laws and that are ignored by the city. Plus, there's nonsense and there's closed doors, negligence, violation of laws, cover-ups, dishonesty.
Stop the timer.
Yes, sir.
Please refer directly to this rezoning application. Don't refer to anything else.
Okay, what I'll do is, let me tell you, Mr. Richardson, we met at a restaurant and we had a discussion on numerous things that you do not want me to talk about. So if you have problems with me, with my testimony, let me say is I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth.
What we're discussing is the rezoning on Tropic Street. We don't refer to the staff, to anything else, unless it is directly involving this rezoning on Tropic Street.
Okay, I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Now, if you have problems with my testimony, you can have problems with it, but you do not take my time away because I'm discussing
Didn't
this.
take your time away. I stopped.
Okay, you haven't. That's true. Yes, sorry. You haven't taken my time away, but I don't want you to
Start
take
it and stay on the subject.
Okay, the subject is this particular thing is that I want to, in conclusion, is what I want to say is, but I want to say some other things about the resilient Titusville and so forth, is that I recommend the termination of city business without going any further until city addresses the misconduct that's going on within city. There's a lot of problems going on with city, and I'm talking about especially the city manager, Scott Larice, and I request that we terminate business until those things are done. I make a recommendation that the city of Titusville, what they do is that they terminate the city manager without.
Do you have anything else to say regarding this rezoning?
This is what I'm talking about. In other words, I think it should be, for example, I think that in this rezoning is we should consider what's going on in the city, and I'm saying it's terminate the business with the city. There's some other things I could say about it, but I think that the right-of-way issue was especially of concern in my area of expertise. But the city is having, this project is looked upon by the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan says many plans, as I've shared with you privately, Mr. Richardson, privately I've shared with you about the resilient Titusville, about the stormwater management plan of the city of Titusville is not being complied by the city, violation of numerous laws, and this is not what the city should be doing. And the flood zones are erroneous too. And so we should correct these things instead of just not talking about them and having closed doors.
Your time is up.
Thank you. I'd like to have another minute, please.
Anyone care to make a motion to give him another minute? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Next card.
That's all the cards.
Okay. Anything else the applicant wants to say? This is your one chance of rebuttal.
One of the ladies say that I ignore their what they had to say, and that's not true. I never ignore anyone. I had the notice for the public to come and meet with me. I left my number, my email address, and everything. If they had any questions, they could talk to me. Now, I want you guys to consider, because everybody here talked about a maximum of 105 units, and I wanted to see that if it could help, maybe we can downgrade that from 105 to something closer to make everybody more comfortable. I'm not sure how you're going to name it as far as R3 or medium density or anything like that, but we would like to move forward and create something nice in that area and make it nicer for everybody to go in and out of their homes, and instead of seeing an abandoned property and trees and bunch of animals and homeless people. That's all we heard a few times. We got violations of people like actually living there, like going inside the property and with a tent or something like that, and staying there for a while and not off with no control over what they do there. So we would like to develop that, and we would like to, if you guys can consider doing that, maybe with a little bit less than 105. It's going to make people more comfortable. I'm sure that maybe we can work something out, but we still need a volume of units so we can actually, have the people to put the money in there and to establish this. As far as the 99 units to 105 units, the change came from the survey that were done. The first we had 6.62 acres, and then after the survey, it changed to a 7.03. So that's why it changed from 99 to 105 on the application.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? Yes.
Sorry, I didn't catch your address. Are you a Titusville resident?
No, I'm not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll bring this item back to the commission. Do you have any additional questions of the staff? Anyone care to make a motion? Member Garad.
I would make a motion based on the dialogue, and I believe it certainly reflects the concerned citizens that the request is not consistent with the future land use element, both in terms of low-density uses with adjacency, and which was cited, I believe, as a policy, flu policy 114.4. But more importantly, to me, as my questions, the flu policy stated 114.6 requires access to a collector road. The application for the future land use change fails that compliance requirement. I make the recommendation of denial.
You make a motion for denial. Is there a second? Vice Chairman Aton. Oops. Member Perez, beat you to the buzzer. Go ahead. Member Perez seconds. Do you have something to add?
No.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Magosko?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. This will be heard at City Council, next Tuesday? Okay. Are you with me? Will this be heard at the next City Council meeting?
July 25th.
Okay, July 25th.
I forgot to hit my button.
That's
I apologize.
Next Tuesday.
First reading is scheduled
First
for,
reading.
Yes, the 25th.
Next Tuesday, first reading.
Then the final public hearing will be the subsequent meeting.
Okay. Next item is item 9B, Brooks Landing Phase 1 Final Plat.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This begins on page 172 of tonight's agenda. Brooks Landing Phase 1 is a proposed 81-lot single-family subdivision located north of JJ Road and west of Hammock Road. The overall Brooks Landing subdivision consists of 143 lots on approximately 71.99 acres. The final plat for Phase 2 will be submitted in the near future. The following are attached and require approval/acceptance. The final plat, covenants, performance bonds for required infrastructure and sidewalks, easement for future water and sewer extensions to the proposed Parish Landing subdivision, which is north of the subject property and located in unincorporated Brevard County. The final plat is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the preliminary plat and final plat requirements described in Chapter 34 of the Code. Staff has reviewed the final plat for consistency with the PD zoning approval, comprehensive plan, land development regulations, and recommends approval. Staff has also viewed the covenants, performance bonds, and easements and recommends acceptance. Thank you.
Any questions of the staff? Member Garad.
I have one for our attorney. I had one of my questions before we got here at the beginning. I asked and got my questions answered. This one was regarding the covenants and restrictions which are provided and required. The first question was, is this typical? And the answer is yes, it's required by the code to have that. But within those covenants and restrictions, there's a section that appears on page 198 of 326, if you want to look at that. And it's section 4.08. It speaks about MSTUs and MSBUs. The question is, I'm not familiar with those being provided for within jurisdictions of local municipal governments. I am familiar with them being provided for by county governments, governing bodies. And my question is that something that may just be a boilerplate language within this that isn't necessary?
Yeah, I do believe that it could be an oversight, and we could, with your motion in this approval, recommend to the applicant that they revise this section prior to final acceptance.
Thank you. That's an answer. That's the answer. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is the applicant here? Lori, do we have any cards?
Yes,
Okay.
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnson, I'm speaking as a registered professional engineer. Some of you know me, I've been here for over 50 years. Was employed by the city of Titusville until retirement in 2008. And I've been active in the community. In fact, I was just, I even asked to become, with all my credentials, I asked to be a member of the P&Z board, but I was denied that by council. They didn't discuss it. I think mainly because of some of the things I've exposed to the city's problems. On this particular issue, which is a approval of a final plat for Brooks Landing. If you remember on Brooks Landing, is that it was it's not on a collector or arterial, and yet it was rezoned for multifamily. So sometimes the city does disobey its own regulations. In this case, I'm coming to you because of the same issue I've talked before, is I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And in this case is that the city of Titusville has serious problems that are being ignored. And for example, some of you know about the sewage spill that is dishonestly being portrayed.
Stop the clock. How does that relate to Brooks Landing? That's the subject we're discussing. Brooks Landing.
Okay.
Nothing else.
Okay. Understanding that this is a quasi-judicial matter is that I'm saying the same conclusion that I had previously, and that is that I recommend the termination of our city business because of the saturation of negligence and dishonesty and cover-ups and so forth the city of Titusville is involved in right now, including, for example, serious problem with resilience and the city of Titusville that I've explained to Mr. Richardson privately, and that is that the city of Titusville seriously violates its stormwater master plan of the greater Titusville. And this is greater Titusville. This is a photo. There's five of these passageways for drainage that look just like this. They're overgrown completely. They're supposed to be maintained. It's required by FEMA, it's required by law, it's required by state statutes, it's required by the city of Titusville to do this. But they don't do it. And yet, what do? Nothing. We won't talk about it. No, we won't talk about it. This is between Fox Lake Road and State Road 50. Horrible things. This is a horrible thing that the city of Titusville is doing. It is not resilient, and that's a false report. Mr. Galindo and Brad Parrish authored, were co-authors, or part of the authors, and said it's a false report. And of course, what the city did is they just erased any of my complaints I made to Human Resources. Erased it. Said, well, thank you for your complaint. We'll do nothing. May I have 2 more minutes?
No.
Thank you.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Comes back before the commission. Any additional questions of the staff? I would say I was on the commission at the time we discussed this, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago. I disagreed with it, and I pointed out that it was a county road. It was not a city street. It is not an arterial. And there was some discussion with the council, and as a compromise, they compromised on the units per acre and everything, and it was finally approved by the commission and the council, but it took a lot of debate. I'd still say that it should not be on a county local road, and somehow they should have access to US 1 instead of one in ingress and egress. But that is not as presented tonight. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Anyone want to make a motion? Mr. Grodd.
I'd like to make the motion to follow the staff's recommendation to approve Brooks Landing Phase 1 together in accepting the covenants and easements, performance bonds for completion of required infrastructure and sidewalks, with the comment made that they should address changing the CCRs, the covenants restrictions, to remove reference to the MSTU and MSBU.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Vice Chair Mediton. Any other discussion? Roll call, please. Lori?
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. What is the date of that hearing before City Council?
I don't have that one written down.
Okay.
I could email the commission tomorrow and let you know.
Okay. Next item is item 9C, White Chaffee Planned Industrial Development.
Yes, sir. This item begins on page 304. The council directed staff to draft amendments to the LDRs to address potential conflicts between the city's land development regulations and the existing uses in certain areas of the city that are zoned for commercial and industrial uses. This includes the unique development that has historically occurred on the properties that front White Drive and Chaffee Drive, all of which are zoned PID, Planned Industrial Development. The Spaceport Industrial Park was platted in 1971, and many of the existing uses are not permitted in the existing zoning category. The ordinance is an attempt to recognize that certain modifications to the land development regulations can serve to sustain existing businesses and enhance economic development opportunities within several areas of the city that allow commercial and industrial uses. The city desires to facilitate compatible commercial and industrial development to promote economic development while ensuring compatibility with existing development patterns. In short, what this ordinance is attempting to do is to provide some flexibility in our existing industrial park west of Space Coast Regional Airport, Tyco Airport. This would allow some flexibility to allow some uses that are currently not permitted within that industrial park, such as automobile repair, building trade services, machine shop, mechanical service and repair, and outdoor storage as an accessory use. So what's happening is there are some existing businesses that are operating that are these types of uses that currently operate, and when a new business of a similar type is wanting to locate in a nearby facility in the same zoning district, the city's having to tell the applicant that that use is not permitted here. And so by recommending approval to adopt this ordinance, we would be adding some flexibility to our industrial park.
Any questions of the staff?
Chairman.
Yeah.
So currently, if someone does this, they had to get a conditional use permit to do it if they do want to get it, or you guys can't do a conditional use permit?
It depends on the use. I believe most of the uses that we're adding flexibility to, which is listed in the recommended action on page 304, are not permitted at all. So even with a CUP, you could not establish that use.
Huh, interesting. Okay.
Vice Chairman, anytime.
Mine's for Chelsea. So I'm a majority shareholder in a company that owns property that fronts Grissom, but is in this general area. Do I have an issue that I should abstain from this?
No, I think that there's an adequate, there's probably at least a dozen other owners in that general area. And if the volume of people who would be affected is greater than that figure, then you don't have to. But if the number is less, then you probably should abstain.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions of the staff? Lori, are there any cards?
Yes,
Okay.
Stan Johnston.
He passes. Anything else?
No, sir, that was all.
Okay. Comes back to the commission. Any further questions of the staff? Anyone care to make a motion? You can do that.
To be the center of attention, I would make a recommendation, follow staff's recommendation that the matter be approved.
Motion to recommend approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Perez. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Does that go before council at the next meeting? Next week?
I should have seen that question coming.
You better be prepared.
I'm hearing July 25th.
Okay, okay. We'll go
Yes,
back.
yes, sir, July 25th.
We'll go back to old business accessory dwelling units.
Point of order, it's supposed to be at the last of the meeting. You voted that we have it at the last of the meeting. This is not the last of the meeting.
No, it's going to be accessory dwelling units, which would come up before petitions and requests from the public.
You didn't say that. That wasn't the motion.
It was understood to be part of the motion. Okay, Eddie, would you describe, we had a couple of meetings regarding the accessory dwelling units, and a couple of phone calls too. Will you describe exactly what we intended to do?
Absolutely. So the origin for this item was the commission was concerned that there were some administrative barriers to developing accessory dwelling units. And so this was an attempt to look at what the code currently permits and to identify any challenges or any restrictions that may be too onerous that are preventing the development of accessory dwelling units. Since then, the commission has met over the past 5 months. Well, let me back up. The commission decided to send council a request for advisability to further discuss this item. And the city council requested that the commission discuss this item for a period of 6 months, which we're coming up on the 6-month period now, to where a decision needs to be made. So in order to help the commission with establishing or finalizing its recommendation, because some decisions have been made in that time frame, and there are still a couple questions left lingering, we created this item on page 11. It's a Word document with some comment bubbles. And I'll just briefly go over that if you'll follow along on page 11. So the first is under section 28.351, accessory dwelling units. There's a comment under the RHP, Residential Historic Preservation Zoning District, that highlights the letter L. So what that means is that accessory dwelling units are currently permitted with limitations in the Residential Historic Preservation Zoning District. Based on the discussion and what I could hear as consensus from the commission, I wrote down that your intent is to keep the L, keep the use as permitted with limitations, that there doesn't appear to be some major impacts to historic structures if there are accessory dwelling units in that zoning district. If I misunderstood, please clarify. But so I figured that based on what I had heard, that item had been discussed and decided on. Next is in subsection C1E. There's a portion, this requirement is actually split into two different requirements. So on the one hand, the second half of the sentence is in red, and it says shall be a minimum of 400 square feet and a maximum of 600 square feet. So that establishes that an ADU must be no smaller than 400 square feet, no greater than 600 square feet. And my understanding based on the P&Z meeting on June 21st is that you'd like to keep that minimum and that maximum. What was left undecided is the second part of that requirement, which is the relationship between the size of the ADU and the size of the primary structure. So currently, the regulation says the floor area of an ADU shall not exceed 25% of the entire floor area of a primary dwelling. So what that means mathematically is that you would have to have a home of 1,600 square feet times 25% comes out to 400 square feet in order to have an ADU. If you had a home smaller than 1,600 square feet, you would not be able to meet both the minimum size limitation of an ADU and the 25% of the structure. It would end up being too small. And so that may be a current limitation if you would like for homes smaller than 1,600 square feet to be able to have an accessory dwelling unit of either between 400 and 600 square feet. And you'll see that's highlighted as action required. So that's a decision we would like to have the commission decide on tonight. Moving on in subsection G, during the June 21st meeting, there was a decision made about parking related to accessory dwelling units. So the current requirement is that at least one, but no more than 2 off-street parking spaces shall be required for an ADU, in addition to the off-street parking required for the principal use. And the discussion was that you would like to see that in some cases, no additional parking be provided and no more than 1 off-street parking space be provided. So based on the minutes of the June 21st P&Z meeting, we drafted this language that says no more than 1 off-street parking space shall be provided for an ADU in addition to the off-street parking for the principal use. And I believe that captures your intent. So no decision required there because that's just summarizing the discussion that has happened already. Continuing, subsection I at the top of page 12, the owner of the property shall reside in either the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit. And the comment is remove. General consensus appears to be that the owner occupancy requirement is not necessary and can be difficult for staff to enforce. So again, that's just based on the general discussion. What I heard, if the commission felt that I got that wrong, please let us know. Moving on, the additional subsection I is highlighted and is action required. It says, if an accessory dwelling unit exceeds 20% of the entire floor area of the primary dwelling, then it shall be compatible in architectural style, color, and exterior facing material to the primary dwelling. This language is not currently in our ADU section. It is current language in our accessory residential structures section. I'll read the comment. This language is proposed based on the Commission's discussion of compatibility with the primary dwelling and the neighborhood. So this compatibility requirement is already required of all residential accessory structures per section 28.391. It's added here to highlight the discussion that you all had, but it is, even if you don't add it in this subsection, ADU subsection, it is already a requirement for all residential accessory structures. And then finally, all of subsection 3 is highlighted, and that's because of the discussion that was related to Indian River City Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District. There was discussion about the fact that currently the code permits accessory dwelling units in this predominantly commercial zoning district, and some of the commission members felt that that was inappropriate. So while that would be possibly contrary to your goal of adding flexibility, if you felt that it just made more sense not to have it in this zoning district, the decision here is, would you like to see ADUs removed from the Indian River City Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District? So 3 questions we have for you. And just to summarize again, that's, do you want a requirement about the primary structure relationship to the ADU size? Do you think it's necessary to have that this based on the size of the ADU, if it's 20% the size of the home, that it must be architecturally compatible? And then finally, is it appropriate in a commercial zoning district?
So we've already taken a vote on 2 items, as I understand. That's the square footage and the parking. Mm-hmm. We've got the other 3 to discuss tonight. Who wants to start the discussion? Chelsea's got a hand raised to the sky.
I just wanted to get your attention. I was going to mention something later, but I think that it's important to mention it now before you get into this discussion again, just briefly, about one of the Senate bills that was passed and became effective the beginning of this month, Senate Bill 250. And one of the many things that this bill does is it says that cities and counties are prohibited from adopting more restrictive procedures or proposing amendments to its comprehensive plan or land development regulations, or for issuing a development permit or development order before October 1, 2024. So we can't be more restrictive in our code for a year and a couple of months. And so that's something that the legislature said as a response to Hurricane Ian and Nicole to allow the state to recover. We are within 100 miles from where the hurricane made landfall, so we are included within this legislation. So we can change our codes, but we can't make them more restrictive until October 1, 2024.
Would what we discussed make them more restrictive?
I believe there's a potential that if you were to remove accessory dwelling units from one of the commercial zoning districts, you're being more restrictive by removing a use.
And so I would not recommend going forward in that direction, which is why I wanted to interrupt you before you go too far in that conversation to make a recommendation that the city attorney and I would just say we can't allow the city to codify given this recent legislation.
What happened to home rule?
It's being obliterated, unfortunately, but I think that also keep in mind our goal with having the discussion on accessory dwelling units was to make it more accessible. Yeah. And so that goes hand in hand with the legislature's intent to not create additional restrictions. And so as we review, we want to make the ADUs more accessible, but we also, in the plain letter of the law, can't make it more restrictive.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Well, mine was about that one. So, are there residences in Indian River City's zoning district?
I haven't conducted that analysis of what existing uses are occurring there. In most of our zoning districts, there are what are called non-conforming uses. And so those uses are typically allowed to continue, but are eventually phased out because they cannot grow, expand, and there are no new types of those uses are permitted. So there's likely at least one.
So, but the way this is written, you could actually do, it's not ADUs associated with residences, it's ADUs associated with any property, so you could actually have an ADU with a commercial building.
Correct. So in subsection 3A, it says shall be limited to one ADU per commercial lot. So the intent is on a commercial property. And that's existing language in our code, so that is currently permitted.
Member Garrett.
Noting the legislation that's changed a little bit how local governments deal with matters. On the one hand, on the other hand, perhaps the commission will recall I was discussing the Indian River neighborhood and how, not being familiar with it per se, where commercial and residential commingle in what's Indian River City. And my query was about the commercial areas, some of which are businesses, some of which are homes currently. And a footnote to one of the exampled ordinances that we were provided by staff, and you did a real good job, by the way. Thank you for doing that. I'd be confused, it may have been the city of Orlando or Orange County, but they touched on the problems that ensued after they adopted the rule. And one of them that rests near and dear to my experience is non-conforming lots of record. In particular, they wanted to amend their code to allow non-conforming lots of record to also enjoy the ability to have it. That's not really necessary here, I don't believe, but what's interesting is that's kind of the Indian River City scenario, is that you've got a transition of non-conformity, houses turned to businesses, houses within commercial use areas, and then new commercial development altogether brand new. So I could myself say it doesn't seem a problem to allow that there, and it seems like it would be consistent not to step into a problem we make, as the example given.
So we shouldn't address or change the Indian River City item.
I would say based on what Chelsea presented, that could cause some issues for the city if we were to move forward in that direction.
Okay. Any other things to discuss? You've got two issues to decide then.
So the other two issues, again, are the consistency of the size of the primary structure to the accessory dwelling unit and the compatibility, the architectural compatibility based on 20% of the.
Member Childs.
Did we throw for E, for the percentage of the entire floor area compared to primary dwelling, did we throw around, maybe it was joking, I don't know, but 50% or something like that? So we don't want like an entire, home, or I can't remember now, because now we're talking about 400 is the minimum, 600 is the maximum. So if you have a 1,200 square foot home, which is, an average size, I guess, 50% would be 600. So, did we talk about 50%? I thought maybe we did. I don't know.
Well, it's got 25%.
Yeah.
in there, so, but yeah, I think, not to jump in, but
Go ahead.
it seems like we've got to either change the percentage or say that there's some exception. I would assume do you know what? I don't know, average size may not be a good, is there a stat for average home square footage in Titusville or in?
I don't have that information, but I will say that staff would definitely recommend keeping a requirement of some sort as opposed to just striking all of the language in yellow, just because that could lead to a much at the same time, even if the percentage were stricken, the maximum size of the ADU would still govern, so 600 square feet would still be the largest you would have.
So.
I would imagine it's about 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, I was thinking 1,100, 1,200 seemed to be a lot of the
Let's put the
ones
difference, 1,150.
I can't do that math as to what the right number is to get to 400. So, yeah, it would have to be something closer to, 30. Well, let's see. 25%. So yeah, we'd have to go more like 33, 40% probably to get there on an 1,100 square foot house. See, 44 would be 440, or 40% would be 440 square feet on an 1,100 square foot house, I think. So, if my math is right, I don't know. I guess I could use my calculator here.
Remember, Charles, while he's calculating.
Yeah. So, are we trying to prevent like someone with a 900 square foot house having a 600 square foot ADU, I guess?
No, I think we're trying to prevent someone with a 1,100 square foot or 1,150 square foot house not being able to do an ADU at all.
Right.
Because they
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
reached the minimum.
Yeah. At least over 40, 40% or more, or around 40% then, I guess.
35% will get us.
35.
Member Morosco. I'll get it right.
Moscoso.
Moscoso.
Did you say, Eddie, that we didn't have to have a percentage, that it could be 400 to 600?
That's correct.
Okay. But could there be a minimum for the house size? Like,
A minimum in order to have an ADU?
yes.
You could propose that, yes. There are already minimum home sizes in each of the zoning districts, so we'd have to make sure that whatever you propose is consistent with all of the zoning districts.
Member Garrett.
If I understood the statute's effect, if you created a rule that doesn't exist, you'd be subject to that. So it may be something you want to broach in a change after 2024, but not now.
Okay. So, anyone care to have any further discussion or make a motion or?
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Did I understand, I was listening carefully, you said that the strike through on page 12 of 326, speaking to the striking of the residential owner homestead property only being qualified, that would be removed based on our discussions we've had heretofore.
Yes, sir. Based on what I understood, the consensus of the commission was, it was to remove that section that says the owner of the property shall reside in either the principal dwelling or accessory dwelling unit. It doesn't say anything about specifically that the property is homesteaded, but the assumption is that
The resident would be, to get homestead exemption would be the correct statement. And the existing 20%, is that within another part of the code?
yes, sir.
So it's not a new code.
Correct. It's only added for emphasis, since the commission had discussed a need to require some compatibility. However, it's not necessarily needed because that section is still in existence. It's section 28.391 that would still require that any structure greater than 20% of the primary structure would have to be compatible.
And the question begs that if that particular side of the code was dropped, it's the intentions on the way to someplace that always concerns me, that would possibly affect the architectural compatibility you're trying to achieve for buildings which are not accessory dwellings, to just throw that part of the code out. So if it remains, it would only go back to Member Anton's question about how small a house would you not be able to get an ADU in, and there probably is some limit that the answer is that's just not a property ripened for an ADU because you have too small a home by the percentage requirement of another section of the code, which is an existing code, not a new code. Come back to that issue in 2024, I guess is the same statement.
Vice Chairman Aton.
So, just so I understand, item E, the one we're talking about here, the way it's written, independent of the highlighting, is in the current code, correct?
The highlighted language and the remaining portion that's in pink, both of those are currently in the code, yes.
Okay, so if we did change it from 25% to 35%, we're actually making it more accessible. We're not restricting it. So we actually aren't going against the legislation. Correct. Yeah, thanks.
Any other discussion? We have a card. Any other discussion? Okay. Lori?
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnson, I'm going to introduce myself again as a registered professional engineer. And saying is that I don't think anyone here that I'm speaking to wants to hear what I have to say. Especially because I expose violations of law by the city of Titusville. I give findings that are not in, let's say, are liked and so forth.
Hold the time, please.
Pardon?
If it has to do with accessory dwelling units, you can talk.
Sure.
If it doesn't, you can wait until later on the agenda to speak
Okay.
during
Yeah.
citizens to be heard.
And in this case is what the P&Z has done is that it's my belief is that years ago, we had near the beginning of the meeting, we had petitions and requests from the public. So what you've done is you shut down the public is what you're doing. That's what you.
I'm following the agenda pattern as it
Yes.
was given to me.
I know it was given to you, but it was changed. In other words, the agenda pattern was changed several times. For example, it changed from.
I've given you the right to speak
Yes.
for 3 minutes to talk
Yes, sir.
about accessory
But
dwelling
I
units.
wouldn't
That's all.
Won't you stop the time when you're talking? I wish you would. I wish you wouldn't take away from the time. That's what you just did.
Well, if you're going to stay on the subject of accessory dwelling units, fine. If you're going to divert from the subject, you have the right to speak under citizens to be heard.
Well, and this,
I'm not going to allow you to speak, and in detriment to the staff, and detriment the city manager on anything right now except accessory dwelling
really?
units.
You just say I can't say this, I can't say that, and so forth. All right. I don't like what you're doing, but as far as this issue is concerned, is that what Attorney Farrell said is I think that what you all said was right. Is that if you don't want to make things more restrictive, like the city has done to taking 5 minutes to 3 minutes, reducing consent order, agenda items, and so forth. So I don't like what you're doing. Thank you.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Back to the commission.
Are we ready for a motion?
Well, anyone care to make a motion?
Sure.
Mr. Perez?
Okay, I make a motion that the floor area of an accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 35% of the entire floor area of the primary dwelling.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Any discussion? Eddie, anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Okay, Lori, call the question.
I just want to make sure we covered all the bullet points of the last remaining things to be done in the motion, correct?
My understanding,
Go ahead.
my understanding is that this is just one of the motions that you'll want to make tonight.
One at a time, thank you.
And then afterwards, if the commission will consider one final vote, kind of ratifying what we've presented here to you tonight with your changes.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes?
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Naton?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Okay, we're down to one item on the accessory dwelling units. It's hard for me to say without water. You gonna go over that one item again?
Yes.
Sure. So in short, the commission had some discussion about whether an accessory dwelling unit should be compatible in color or architectural style or materials. And so our code currently has some language in the accessory structures section for residential structures that says that if any accessory dwelling unit, or excuse me, if any structure exceeds 20% of the entire floor area of the primary dwelling, then it shall be compatible in architectural style, color, and exterior facing material. So that language was carried over to this section, and the term structure was changed to accessory dwelling units to customize it to this specific section of the code. But this is a requirement that already exists in the code. So if you have a home that is 1,200 square feet, this is going to test my math skills. I'm not going to give you an example because I can't come up with the math at the moment, but anytime an accessory dwelling unit is greater than 20% the size of the primary structure, it has to be the same color. If you feel that that's important for compatibility with the home and the neighborhood, then we can add this here. Like I said, if this language is not carried over, it's still a requirement in the code. This was just an attempt to highlight the discussion that was had by the P&Z about compatibility.
Okay, any discussion? First is Member Childs.
I was going to say that I think that was an important thing. The city council had indicated that, they were worried about what, the impact of the neighborhoods, the look of the neighborhoods. That was one of their main points that they wanted us to consider. So I think keeping this the way it is and not being more restrictive since we can't, I think it would be a good idea to keep this how it is.
Okay, and I'll refer you to you as Member M till you spell it phonetically.
Okay.
They don't teach phonics anymore, do they?
Thank you. May I ask a question of the staff?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So my question is, would this also impact the historic homes? Like if Ms. Schiffelow wanted to add an ADU to her Norwood home, would it need to be consistent with the character of her home, or could she do whatever she'd like with the ADU?
So as far as that language, yes. Currently accessory, I don't know the zoning on her home. Let's assume that it is residential historic preservation. Accessory dwelling units are currently permitted there with limitations. So as long as they meet these limitations, they can be permitted. And like I mentioned before, this language is not in this section, but it is already a requirement elsewhere in the code. So if she were to submit a building permit application for an accessory dwelling unit that exceeds 20% the size of her home, it would still have to meet this requirement today, even if this language isn't changed in the code in the future.
So the requirement to match her home, just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one. And following up on your mathematical skill to figure it out, this provision, although I do believe that they should have put those together if you were going to have them and one blush, but on the other, you've got this new statute. Would there be any possibility of interpreting this being a new part of the code, even though it's being moved companion within the code? It already exists. It makes it easier for the public to read. You don't have to go to page 1 and then over to page 10 to find your answer.
I think that since that criteria already exists, it would be a very difficult argument for anyone to challenge that would be new regulations. So I think that we would feel comfortable allowing that to be codified.
Thanks.
Vice Chairman Aton.
So this is an addition, you're repeating it, it's not currently in the code in this section, even though it's in the other section?
Correct.
Okay.
It is language that exists in the code today that has been brought over to this section to specifically draw attention to the fact that ADUs of this size must be compatible.
But we would have an option of just leaving it where it was, and it still applies, it's just not reinforced in this.
Absolutely. So the detriment is the code may become a little bit longer, especially if you continue to make these types of amendments that are, you're basically duplicating requirements. But in some cases it may be helpful. And like was mentioned earlier, if the residential accessory structure section were ever modified, this section would still hold firm to the 20%.
Chelsea.
And if the Planning and Zoning Commission were to include this as part of your recommendation, there's definitely time for City Council to remove it later, but if you don't include it now, they can't remove it later.
Makes sense. Any other discussion? Anyone care to make a motion on this item? To keep it as it is, or?
Well, I guess move it, right? Or repeat it, yeah. I'll make a motion that we have this part of the code repeated in this section of the code for if an accessory dwelling unit exceeds 20% of the entire floor area of the primary dwelling, to move that part over. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? You want to say anything, Eddie? I saw you itching toward the...
I was turning off my microphone.
So we're not moving it, we're repeating it.
Oh, repeating it, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Lori.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Childs,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay, that is the 4 items, striking the 5th one, which we thought was too restrictive. Do we need to add anything else?
I would request that the commission make one final motion accepting all of these changes, and I'll just summarize again. Comment G1 to keep accessory dwelling units as a limited use in the residential historic preservation zoning district. On item E, there was discussion about increasing the threshold to 35% of the entire floor area of the primary dwelling, so an accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed 35%, whereas currently the language says 25%. The commission would like to keep the minimum 400 square feet size and maximum 600 square feet size for an accessory dwelling unit. The parking would change to no more than one off-street parking space shall be provided for an accessory dwelling unit. The requirement for the owner to reside within either the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit would be removed. The language regarding accessory dwelling units exceeding 20% of the entire floor area being architecturally compatible will be kept in the proposed ordinance moving forward. And then finally, no changes to the Indian River City Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District.
Any questions? Anyone care to make that monumental motion? Come on, we've been discussing this 5 months.
You don't need to repeat everything he said. You can just make a motion that you approve all of staff's comments in the proposed document.
All right.
Member, Vice Chairman Aton.
So I move that we accept all of staff's comments per our individual votes on those sections for the accessory dwelling unit.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Lori.
Member Childs?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Member Garot?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Hallelujah. We finalized that item. And I want to say we've got another item in regard to tiny homes. I'm glad that we kept them separate from accessory dwelling units. If you go down to Cocoa off of 520, turning left, you see that tiny homes have been mixed in the RMU zoning, what we call RMU. Is that right, Eddie?
RMH, residential.
RMH.
I couldn't
Used
tell
to
you.
be RMU years ago. That there's a mobile home, then there's a tiny home. The tiny homes are beginning to dominate the mobile home park. And it's kind of interesting to look at. And there's some tiny homes there that are like 250 square feet. I don't believe that's acceptable. But in our current ordinance, we require them to be in a cluster, not independently on individual lots. So if you're going to Vieira or going to Cocoa, stop and take a look. Turn left right in front of McDonald's, go to the second mobile home park and look at the mixture of tiny homes with mobile homes. And we'll discuss it in 3 more months. We'll take a break at this point in time. Okay, the next item to discuss is heights.
Yes, sir. The discussion about building heights begins on page 82. And so this was a discussion that was brought about by Member Garad. And we've provided for you on page 83, the land development regulation definition for building height. And then on page 84, the definition in the Florida Building Code for building height. And I just wanted to explain how to read this document. I wasn't aware of this. The Florida Building Code, the language after the bold, where it says height, comma, building, that is the definition. Everything that comes after that is after the symbology, the 4 squares and a diamond pattern, that is what's called commentary. So that's not the code. That's not the Florida Building Code. That's an explanation for how it should be interpreted and how it should be applied.
I figured a question would come from you, Mr. Garad.
Thank you. And Eddie, I really appreciate that information, encountering that before for members that may not have a in-depth knowledge of building codes, how they're developed. That's where this commentary stuff is very important when you start doing interpretations as a building official. It's not just off the top of your head. They dig into the commentary section to find out where something originated from. Why did you create it? So that's very informative, and thank you. Another comment I would make, and since I kind of brought this up for discussion, is that in, again, complimenting you, showing what is the definition by a land development code, absent a life, health, safety code, which the building code is a life, health, safety code. And when you read the definition, you read into how much of the life and safety provisions are embodied with the definition. What's the building's height? Having said that, what comes before commissions, this commission, other commissions, city councils, when you hear somebody say, I'm going to have a 2-story building, or staff reports that the zoning district allows a 2-story building. Stories, I always laughingly called fables, is difficult because if you go to the building official and ask, what is the height of a story? You will have them tell you it varies. It may be this or it may be that. I'm sure you've seen homes 1 story in height that have elevated ceilings. Life safety codes allow for that. Makes sense. a community's vision of what it looks like, which is more akin to a zoning regulation or embodied in a land development code, could very well come from aesthetic values. It may come from compatibility values. Tonight you had several discussions about how this is going to look next to that. And so when you create a building permit request and you come forward, the permit request is subject to two worlds. One is the zoning regulation and somewhat ambiguous, what is the height of the building? To the extent life safety code, on the other hand, will define where the height is measured from. And so examples are out there that sadly enough, I didn't have enough paper in my copier to make copies for everybody. So what I'd ask is I'm going to kind of pass down these pictures as I comment and just kind of take a look at them quickly. There's nothing outstanding about it, but we'll start with that one and then I'll pass them on down. And what you'll see in the first picture is a building that I got out of the literature that you handed out earlier, Talking Points. And this is the video. I cut it from the video, but that's a building on Riverside Drive, not too far from this building. And what you'll see when you look at it is a flat roof with appurtenance, they're air conditioning units. Not many people would be too concerned with worrying about the height of that building because the roof is the height of the building, it's flat. In this picture, it's a brand new building. That was also in Titusville Talking Points, which is the new Kentucky Fried Chicken. And herein is how building codes reflect looking at a building which has got a facade in order to, rightfully so, block the view of all the appurtenance, in this case, elements of a restaurant. They're not pretty, they're ugly, frankly. So we block the view, but when you ask how tall is the building, your first blush is to look at the building from the outside and say, well, it's that tall. I'm pointing in the air, representing some height. You're not in the helicopter looking down at the appurtenance covered behind the facade. And if you were to ask, looking at it, how tall is the building, you might also ask, where is the roof? It's below the facade. So why that's important is that under the building code, deferring to it for the determination of the height, you can create a facade like I illustrated in those two photographs. And one, you didn't put the facade, you can see the appurtenance, but not many people would conclude that that appurtenant, the air conditioner, is the building, so you wouldn't answer the question, how high is the building, other than it's as tall as the roof. In this picture, which is a newer building that also came off of the information on Talking Points, because in this video they actually had a flyover so you could see the new building on the Indian River, where you have the same thing you see in the example of the Kentucky Fried Chicken. You have appurtenance air conditioners which have got a facade at the roof line, and the building code determined the roof is the flat roof. And in that particular case, there's another picture. If you look at the left side of this diagram, that's off the plans and specifications for the building, in which you'll see a notation to where the height of the building is 57 feet, and you'll notice the arrow lines up with the flat roof. Again, above that are appurtenance and facades, some of which are inconsequential, maybe 12, 16 inches, it's not significant. On the other hand, and the most important attribute of that is in this picture, what you see is the front of the building, and you see what has been incorporated into the design of the building, and this is a mechanical appurtenant. It's more or less the structure of the building. I believe that will be the elevator, and the way elevators work, you either have it by a cable or you have it by hydraulic lifts. I don't think they have magnetic ones yet. So when you look at this building in that photograph, if you were standing and someone asked a layperson, how tall is that building? Or maybe more appropriately, where is the height of the building? And I would say, in my opinion, I would point to that tallest point of the structure. Structure is important because in the shoreline mixed-use zoning district, it specifies that the maximum overall height won't exceed 57 feet. This building, the last diagram I showed you, is a building which is 57 feet high. It's the sketch on the plan that shows the 57 feet is measured to the flat roof. That building is not, however, the example of Kentucky Fried Chicken, where you clearly see it's a facade to cover up ugly structures. This is a mechanical appurtenance necessary for the design of the building that houses people on multiple floors. To get them to the multiple floor landings, they have an elevator. Well, by design and limitation, you could have built that building as tall as it is, which is 57 feet on the diagram, but you would not have been able to utilize the structure appurtenance, which is the elevator towers. In addition, it's the top of the stairwells. They go above the top of the floor for life safety reasons. And back to the point, life safety reasons are, in this instance, you have a fire exit and you design it accordingly. So by the height of the building at 57 feet, you of course have to have the stairwell exceed that height. It's sealed, it's fireproof, and it's designed for life safety. To get people up and down the floors, you use an elevator. And in this case, you use the design of an elevator that uses a cable, and it elevates it based on it. But those are structural components of the building. And 57 feet was allowed to be the height because it met the building code. But the mixed-use zoning district speaks about structural height. So if the elevator shaft, which is discounted, the elevator's wheelhouse, as I call it, or the top of the fire escapes are exceptional to that limitation, that's all fine and good. But turn it around and say, I have a 57-foot height limit. That would mean I'd have to have a different design. In fact, I might have to lower my building by 1 floor if I wanted to use the design that used that type of elevator, and I had fire requirements that made my fire towers be sealed. They would be 57 feet because they are a structure of the building. One time I think I tried to explain it as not all structures are buildings, but all buildings are structures. And that's like a radio antenna in a home. So one of the reasons I brought this up stems from another statute's recent adoption, which says that once you've created a measurement in your area of mixed-use development, which I believe is the shoreline, and in fact, if you take into account the various multiple-story buildings that exist here today, one is older than most. I believe it's an assisted living facility here near the
Titusville Towers.
Then you have 2 more south of us. And then, of course, you're going to have one that was approved as part of the planned development down at the causeway. Tranquility, is that it? That went to 150 feet of height. The 17-foot difference in that one building, I would say I don't think meets the measure of the intention of the rule, limiting building height to 57 feet, because it called upon the definition from the building code. If 57 feet is the limitation, it should be written into the code, where do you measure it to? And in my opinion, that's something that should be examined for changing the code, to which you make a more definitive statement about what is the point of the height that you make that measurement to. And if it is what you're intending to do, as the examples I just gave everybody, those facades may be inconsequential in one instance, or in another instance, very consequential. It meant the difference most likely between a 4-story building and then those structural improvements that are warranted, not a 5-story building. So it actually was that you increased the building's height by 1 story because you were able to add these necessary improvements. And with the new statute, the height of that building then is the benchmark. Anybody who wants to build in the 1-mile radius from like-kind buildings currently in effect, July 1st, gets to say, what's the height of that building? And as my kind of summary said, would you point to the top of one of those examples and say, well, no, the building's not that high. It's as high as that flat roof that's underneath everything. And it's my humble opinion and my consideration to put forth to the city council to re-examine how you define buildings and what your purpose of definition is. If it's aesthetic values, tall next to small, or taller next to smaller, and compatibility because of that, that maybe one more story, 3 stories next to 1 story is not outrageous. But if 3 stories has another 17 feet on it, that's the top of my house where I live. So I'm really making an extra story perceptually, and I would say I'm trying to suggest that a zoning regulation is community standard. It's not life safety code. And that community standard is what I would ask this council to pass on to the city council. If that's what they want, to have a code based on, then they need to redefine how they measure the top of a building so that you get one-in-one call. It comes from a land development code or a zoning regulation under a community standard provision, as opposed to deferring to a building code under a life safety recommendation. And it very clearly illustrated in what you backed up this with, the building code versus the zoning code.
As I recall, I remember this subject coming up with the old Searstown Mall, when he wanted to add an elevator shaft and launch viewing on top of the building. But you make a good point, Member Garrod, and we've got to call some cards if there are any. I'd encourage you to share those pictures with the staff and meet with the staff to discuss it sometime so that they understand now. They'd probably understand what you're saying, but get a visual understanding of what you're talking about, because you made some really good points. Vice Chairman Aton.
So could this be interpreted as more restrictive and fall under the same? I think you know the answer. Yeah.
I would like to add, I think I already would agree with you on that, but Rome wasn't built in a day. So I think you got 15 months, and hopefully you're not going to have a flurry rush of 150-foot buildings up and down the shoreline within 1 mile of tranquility, or conversely, probably I'm going to guess that building's 120, 130 feet, the tower. A rush of those in downtown, because the mixed use covers this whole area. I don't think that will happen. My hope is that you refine the definition, and I may add that doing that in the next 14 months or 15 months would be probably about how long it takes to discuss all the attributes, make a better presentation for city council to see that, and that would be exactly where I would hope we get. So thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Are there any cards?
Yes. Tony Schiflo.
I am going to speak to the historic nature of the Norwood House, which was built in 1895. And at that time, it was built as a 2-story structure with a very large window facing east. And at that time, the trees were much smaller. Downtown had burned down. It's only 6, maybe 7, depending on how you count them, blocks from the river. And I'm sure that Mr. and Mrs. Norwood had a tremendous view of the Indian River Lagoon, because I could almost see, if it wasn't for that big 10-story assisted living monstrosity on the river. Then when I go over the bridge and come back from way out by the beach, all I can see are those ugly condos right there by the bridge. And then I drive down the road and US 1, and I just love to go that way because I love to see the river. And there's only very few places, especially if you're driving, where you can get enough time that you can look at it and admire the view. And when it's not smelling, it's beautiful. Even when it is smelling, sometimes it's pretty gorgeous. I would like to speak to the aesthetics of building heights. I was here when we had the discussion about the Searstown Mall, and you allowed it to go to 10 stories. But, you know, those neighbors that live on those small streets over there in those little single-family one-story houses, they can always walk over to US 1 and look across at the river. They don't have to be able to see much. And then I was here when we had this big debate up here by the marina about the property that Woody Rice is going to be developing, and we're allowing 10 stories there. And I really opposed that because as a member of the Historic Preservation Board, that is going to be so out of scale right near downtown. And that's one of the beauties of the development there, is that it is within walking distance of, well, they think it's within walking distance. Have you walked lately in the weather here and tried to cross US 1 to get from downtown to the marina or something? It's not really practical, but that's one of the selling points, is that it's close to downtown, and so the walking. But we're allowing now 10-story hotels over there and parking decks. And I'd like to speak about the Dream Apartments, or not the Dream, I love those, that's beautiful, and they're National Register now. They're real historic, mid-century. The further down buildings, the new ones across from the Titusville High School, they were only supposed to be 5 stories, right? But when you look at them, and I count it, there's 5 stories on top of the parking garages. So that elevates the whole thing beyond what I would think. And I thought the 5-story limit was kind of all over town. Please be careful about allowing those changes to heights.
Any other cards?
Stan Johnston.
Stan Johnston, registered professional engineer, and my wife has had 5 generations of her family living in Titusville. I have had 5 generations of family living in Titusville. I still have 4 generations. You guys don't listen to me. Here I am, a professional engineer. I'm a resident. I'm a former city of Titusville employee with the highest pay grade I could in the position I was with the city of Titusville, such that they couldn't even give me pay raises when everyone else get percentages. So you don't listen to me. What I'm listening to right now is that when I came to Titusville in 1970, and many years after that, is that people would rave about Titusville. Wonderful Titusville. Because it was a low-rise community. If you go up to where I used to live, we had 2-story houses. Very few 2-story houses in Titusville at that time. So it was being a low-rise community. We're losing it. We're losing that what people were proud of. And I don't know that you realize it, but it's just we're going to have maybe a 10-story. We've rezoned a number of places for 10 stories. So in the next few years, we're going to have more and more high rises that already have been rezoned. Compliments of P&Z and compliments of our city council. So I'm not pleased with what you're doing. I'm not pleased with your increasing building heights, not at all. And I'm not pleased with your increasing these densities, which we were people were so proud that it was more like a single-family home area that it was. And when the boom came, so anyhow, I was in 1970. It was getting to be a bust at that time. So anyhow, I'm encouraging you as a community member, is that try not to increase building heights again and again and again. It reduces the privacy of people, of neighbors, and it reduces the visibility. Right now I used to be able to watch, let's say, 200 miles away, or maybe not 200, 100 miles away, but now buildings are interfering because you can't see them. I mean, I was in Tampa before, and I could see one of the shuttle go off, and I would see it also from DeLand. So anyhow, sky view is important. Thank you.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. I've been here since 1967. As you predate me.
Somewhat, yes.
Yeah. And Titusville Towers for the elderly was built in 1968, 69. So it's been there for quite a long time. Anything else on this item? Yes.
I just wanted to add that for the citizens that were speaking, my discussion is not about changing height limitations. My discussion is focused on the definition by which the height is determined. To that extent, I hope that in 15 months we can, or someone can re-explore what you're attempting to do by aesthetic values, not deferring it to life safety code definitions.
And bring some consistency.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, so to summarize really is, I think it makes sense what you're saying is because planning and zoning is about look and feel. And if you use building code, which is more about just the building, and planning and zoning is about how the city looks. So if a building looks this tall, then that's probably what we should go off, because that's what we're really trying to plan, right? You're trying to plan what it's going to look like. So it makes sense. It makes sense what you're saying. So thank you.
And I would encourage you to talk to the staff, and I'm sure they'll share these pictures. And we'll talk about it sometime in the next 14 months. Okay, next item is petitions and requests from the public, present, and press.
Stan Johnston. I have three requests to make, and the first request is that I want you to understand is that we have council meetings, and we have TEC meetings, and we have P&Z meetings. These are up front for the public, most public meetings there are. And the P&Z meeting is the only meeting. If you want to speak to them as public speaking, is that you have to wait. Here now, I had to wait over 2 hours to speak under petition required. It didn't used to be that way. So what you do is, as far as I'm concerned, I want you to listen to me, and you're not going to listen to me. You need to change it. TEC, council, they have it about the first thing is petitions and requests from the public. But you guys, you cut the public down. The fact is, what happens is, instead of people going to P&Z and speaking on things, they go to council. You're putting more time on the council because people which should be addressing at P&Z, they go to council because you have made people wait 2 hours, 2.5 hours, so forth, to do public speaking. It's not right what you're doing. Second thing, I want you to obey the law. I want you to obey the law, and you're not doing it. I'm giving you examples. For example, this picture right here. The city of Titusville is disobeying the law. What do? You do what? Nothing. Shame on you. I want you to understand, I'm a professional engineer. I've been that way for years. I was trained that and so forth. Civil engineering. And what you're doing is in my profession. And I'm telling you what you're doing, violating laws. And what do? You ignore me. And now talking about defamation, you guys are spitting on my profession. In fact is, I have challenged the city repeatedly. Listen up. Repeatedly, I said, get a professional engineer to dispute what my findings, dispute my violations of laws that I exposed to you. And you know what you do? Nothing. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on all of you. I'm telling you the truth, and what do? I'm talking about also the legal department and community development. Shame on you. Shame on you. It's ugly what you're doing. I'm telling you, I'm reporting you all these violations of laws, and what do? Nothing. Foolish. Talk about foolishness. And you will not get a professional engineer to oppose me. You will not do it. Why don't you do it? Because they'll agree with me. Shame on you. This is terrible what you're doing. And in other words, when I go and I ask to be on the P&Z commission, they don't even listen. They won't listen to a word I say. I'm talking about council, city manager. It's disgusting what the city is doing. Sewage spills, not reported. False reports, Resilient Titusville, this guy right here.
Okay.
I'm asking for 2 more minutes. I don't expect you to give it to me either, will you?
Anyone care to give Mr. Johnson 2 more minutes? No.
No, I didn't think so.
Any other citizens to be heard?
Shame on you.
Schiffelow, Norwood House, Tropic Street. I'm here to mention the fact that there are a lot of plans for the future of Titusville, and you guys are on the front line. You guys and Miss Moscoso, and over here. There's a lot of talk about my neighborhood. It's being dubbed West Titusville, and I'm very worried about the infill that will be happening there because they're going to gentrify the area. And it is an area that's mostly single-family homes and empty lots. And it's very worrisome to me about the infill, and y'all have been talking some really nice things about allowing accessory dwelling spaces that would allow some of the people in this area to, you know, create more economic situation for them as gentrification happens. You talked about heights and regulating heights. And I would like to encourage that when zoning requests come before you where people want to come in and take an empty property within the West Titusville area and build 3- and 4-story multifamily units because we need affordable housing in town, when knowing that's not going to be really affordable for the people that are in that in-town neighborhood. I'm talking about those that live in the tents and the empty properties and that move from this house to that house and stay with this relative or that relative. It's a very fluid neighborhood for a very stable neighborhood. I've told other people, I'll tell you maybe, my neighbors across the street and across the street here, their kids went to high school together. They bring their children home to play at Grandma and Grandpa's houses while they all visit. It's a very stable neighborhood for all the all the transients. So I would want, and you'll probably see me as different issues come before you, different developers wanting to put multi-story, multi-unit, multi-family, affordable housing in West Titusville. Be careful, be leery. Read your agenda packets very thoroughly. I read it. Yours is this was over 300 pages. I even read City Council when it's 2,000 pages. You have to be prepared because they're trying to sneak stuff all over us, and the state legislature is not helping at all with local control. But take the control that we can and be careful about allowing the type of infill that we're talking about, especially in established long-term neighborhoods. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Any other citizens to be heard?
Yeah, in regards to the So in regards to the first case we had about Tropic Street, so I understand that you guys are kind of denying the request because of what the road, and we are not on a collector road. So I have like two different things that I want to ask you guys. First of all, when I contacted the city in the beginning about the changing the zoning to R3, they basically say that they don't see anything that seems to be a problem. And when you look on the map, you can easily see that it's not on a collector road. So I wish it was I wish someone would tell me that in the beginning so we can apply correctly or anything like that. The second thing, I think that you mentioned to me that Rock Pit Road is in contact with a collector road, right? Oh, in interior road. So Rock Pit is going directly to an interior. Okay. Yeah. So I was thinking that you mentioned it's going to a collector because Singleton is a collector road. So and Tropic is meeting with Singleton. So I got confused a little bit by that. So the next thing is at that point, what will be your recommendation for that property to get the highest amount of units in there? There is anything that you recommend approaching the city council, for example?
Well, you need to present a concept plan to the staff. That's the way it works. Eddie?
Yes, sir. So a concept plan is not required, but sometimes it can help. I would recommend this board they review our staff report and consistency with the comp plan. I think what you're asking for is what other alternatives you have if this case is ultimately denied. Because just to clarify, tonight wasn't a denial of the application. It was a recommendation that City Council deny it. So our staff report and the commission's recommendation will go to City Council for a final decision. So as far as alternatives, we can discuss, you can contact me and we can discuss some alternatives, looking at other application types you could submit. But I don't think this commission will be able to help you with alternatives tonight.
We will need to go throughout the whole process again.
Possibly.
Of doing it, or we can basically make like an offer for zoning it like that, but with a less amount of units to accommodate the situation.
So typically a new application is required because the staff has to review your new request against the comprehensive plan and the land development regulations. So I don't believe we'd be able to use your existing application to amend it to a different different zoning district or comp plan designation.
Okay, so at the city council, they can basically, let's say, approve that, but with restrictions. For example, approve the application, but say, okay, we're approving it because, you apply, but we have limits to the amount of units that we're allowing you to build there. It's an option.
That's a possibility, yes.
It's a possibility.
If city council were to find that your application was consistent with the comprehensive plan, they don't have to go with the staff recommendation or the planning and zoning recommendation.
They see it from their views, I guess.
Correct.
Okay. All right, I guess that's what I want to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other citizens to be heard? Any other? Okay, we'll go into reports, city staff.
No reports from me.
No reports.
City attorney.
As I mentioned earlier, Senate Bill 250 is one of the many items in the new legislation, and we will be bringing more back to you on that. I'll probably provide a summary with the entire legislation for your next agenda packet.
How's the baby?
She's walking, she's talking, she's so much fun.
Do you think she wants to eventually be on city council?
Well, she's not a voter yet, and I think that's one of the prerequisites, so it might take some time, but we'll see, maybe in a couple of decades.
Under chairperson, I said at the beginning of the meeting, we might briefly introduce ourselves. We maybe should keep that to the next meeting. Do y'all agree? Okay. Yes?
I agree.
Okay. Any member have a report? Yes.
I have one thing to suggest, and Eddie may be familiar with this. They're having a meeting in Tampa, too much for anybody to probably attend, and it's all about the new legislation's effect on land use, and it's being presented by the American Planning Association, the Florida chapter. And the presentation that you'll make will add new information to everybody as well. I was able to go through another organization which has it available online, which is 1,000 Friends of Florida. About a month or so ago, went through an analysis of how all this stuff shakes it all up. And it was a pretty good presentation. It's available to you if you go in and search under 1,000 Friends of Florida and just query, or perhaps I can send you and you can send it to other members. But I found it very informative to try to get your arms around a very large subject right now.
Eddie, what do you see coming to the for the next agenda package?
Yeah, we've got.
It makes me nervous that Chelsea's laughing.
We just have so many applications. Really, things don't seem to be slowing down just yet. So we've got several. We've got a CUP, small scale amendments, and we're done with the easy properties. So
Okay.
they're all going to be thinkers.
It'll be August, so that the commission won't accept my challenge to wear shorts at the next meeting? Okay, I will too. Anything else? Anything else to come before us? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.